in my shape-shifting shirt. I'm back! Sorry it took me a while, considering plans that have been going on with film projects, music projects, trying to be social in college, studying in college, trying to get to college with bus timetables. With all that being laid out on the table, outside of a few smaller uploads, I kinda sorta left my channel to gather dust for a month or so. But hey, I'm back now. And I've actually planned out what I want to do for this October season rather than completely missing the deadline like I did last year. So with that said, let's try and make an effort to go through all this in one video, shall we? Alright, so for those who don't know, Harmony Korine is a Californian director who preferably specializes in being just plain weird. He's made a lot of controversial movies, he's even good friends with a lot of controversial filmmakers, and him as well as his films have a certain physique around them. Like, if you at least remember one image that his films put out, then the film has successfully done its job. And boy, has he made a lot of weird and unmarketable movies for me to review here. Like seriously, strap in everybody, this guy's entire filmography is going to put the Andy Warhol video to shame, let me tell you.
Really should get a job. Well, you should really walk around the bin.
This movie, I have no opinion on it. No, really. Like, does anybody even have an opinion on a movie called Trash Humpers? No, cause that'd be unbelievably stupid. Trash Humpers is several people causing several heinous acts. The movie. Okay, I'm gonna say this, I know this was one of the many films Korine made that got itself an ironic cult following, but I say this at the bottom of my heart, I don't know why this is considered part of his mainline filmography. I mean, say what you will about his other movies, at least they had a point. Like, what are the messages in his other films? Gummo, Poverty is Not Vague or Undefined, Spring Breakers, Embrace the Chaos. Aggro Drift, Revenge isn't recommended, but goddammit is it oh so satisfying. Trash Humpers, I don't know, be an asshole, for old time's sake. This is by far one of the strangest and most unhinged movies I've ever seen. And I've seen Sasquatch Sunset. It's like if John Cristofalusi made a live-action remake of Fat Slags, but even with that, I could at least make sense of how surreally unhinged it is. Here, what am I even looking at?
Trash! Get it, suck it, don't fuck it! Suck it! Fornicating trash!
Well, you said it, not me. I get that it's supposed to look extremely cheap because this thing was filmed entirely with one of my wishlist must-haves, a VHS camcorder. But like, this looks like it belongs more in that weird side of YouTube, let alone something that managed to get a screening at the Toronto International Film Festival. And you know what's even stranger? This movie had an $8.2 million budget. Where did that money go? But as poorly put together as Trash Humpers is, this is still a 4 out of 10 movie after all. It's a 4 out of 10 that has a lot of fun going towards it. Similar to Jillian and Donkey Boy, the script was more so written down ideas rather than something that's supposed to flow as a consistent narrative. Sure, these guys are going around 69ing bins, but they're also hosting parties, breaking TVs, and even killing one another at one point. There's a sense of freedom seeping from this, and while it is a major outlier in Korine's filmography compared to the more hi-fi quality and pacing of something like Beach Bum, like Christ, this doesn't just stick out like a sore thumb, but it sticks out like that thumb in that Splinter episode of SpongeBob everybody hated. It enjoys where it is in the natural order of things, and doesn't care what anybody thinks, which makes for pretty good shock humor. Korine managed to do his own thing in between working on several mainstream releases, and you know what? He's earned it. Good for him. Overall, I give it 4 out of 5 Irving Sismans. I would watch it again.
This music that you play for us comes from the depths of hell.
Aggro Drift. Or Aggro Jawumph. Afro. Probably the most elusive movie of Korine's we're going to be talking about today, and his latest for the moment. Waiting for a chance to see Aggro Jawumph was like being stuck inside a brazen bull. It was pure agony. And there is a good reason as to why I was excited for it. It was the first movie done under the Edgelord banner that he co-founded with Travis Scott. The movie starred Travis Scott. It was never released worldwide except for a few select film festivals. It was the first movie we got from Korine in 4 years, unless you want to count Circus Maximus as one. I don't. And it was shot entirely through infrared cameras, so as to be expected, I was very impatient to see this one. Waiting for this was painful. I mean, I could have flown out to the Toronto Film Festival to see this, but 1, I don't have a passport yet, and 2, have you seen the festival prices nowadays? Ain't no way I'm gonna pay for all that just to see Travis Scott shooting up gang members on the big screen. But I think Harmony gave up with treating me like a dog with a shot collar because he released the entire thing on his website for £12. Again, I'm a cheap bastard, so I pirated it instead. Hey, gotta preserve stuff somehow. So what do I think of the movie that I've been waiting what felt like decades for? Well, it's pretty low on the list, so what do you think? Don't get me wrong, the thermal vision approach was a massively inspired choice. It makes every shot in the film feel very stylized, and the colors pop out at you like it's trying to emulate that feeling that you're watching a video game cutscene. A very trippy video game cutscene, but still one nevertheless. So it was one hell of an experience to see unfold. But at the end of the day, it just feels like any other modern action thriller, just with Korine's signature what's a story method.
What's a computer?
There's a lot of talks about revenge, there's a family that gets little to no screen time, and its only driving point is that big name you recognize because Korine likes Fortnite, I don't know. Even with the infrared, the entire movie looks unbelievably cheap, which I get was the point, but I swear half of these masks were just added in post. It's very directionless with where it wants to go with what little story it had. Hell, the movie doesn't even end as it just stops. And the dialogue is...
I must always retrieve my money. It is the only thing that matters. I will walk through hell. It is the currency that provides life, and money is what buys freedom. I will travel amongst ghosts and killers and demons and more demons. Those wishing to do me harm, but I have no fear.
Let's just say that choices were made and just leave it at that. But that being said, I do like this movie. It's not perfect, but the seemingly endless amount of flaws mostly adds to the charm of it all. And I can't say that it wasn't at all ambitious. Not to mention that the music is really good throughout, and plus, it's Harmony Korine. Of course the cinematography is going to look absolutely gorgeous. And I honestly wouldn't be that salty about this film if it wasn't for the fact that I had to wait nearly a year to see this. But I am, and you can't do anything about it. There's a shot of a rabbit. That's my favorite animal. Screw this, next entry.
1991. I was born in 1992, so I have no idea about this movie.
So Juliet and Donkey Boy. This was something I couldn't really find a lot of information about. I mean, the movie itself is there in its entirety. I watched it and got a massive kick out of its bending of both typical and experimental film rules. Hell, it pretty much broke every cardinal rule that was set up by Lars von Trier's film collective, Dogma 95, but Trier absolutely adored it, citing it as an example of really thinking outside the box with what he's been given. But it's a lot more mysterious than a lot of Korine's other films. Like, the Wikipedia page for this is tiny compared to the pages of its other works. Like, what is this? A Wikipedia page for ants?
I have virtually nothing to say about this movie. He's right.
What's there to even say about this one? The improvising of everyone there was pretty neat to see, especially for a low-budget film at the time, and it does give off the vibe of it being a cursed home video in a way. But that's about it. There's nothing special about this one, and outside of a few select shots, I'll probably forget about it in a week or so. Bottom line, Julian Donkey Boy was ass. That joke was terrible.
Golden brown, texture like sun.
The movie stars Matthew McConaughey. I'm just kidding. I don't really have much to say about the beach mom outside of it being really, really fun. For a while, mainly because they're both very similar in tone, I always thought this was more of a spiritual successor to Spring Breakers in a way, but this felt a lot more grounded in its approach and not nearly as chaotic. To be fair, the only reason as to why this reminded me of Spring Breakers in the first place, and the reason as to why this movie is so high on this list, is our main lead, Moondog, played by the sovereignest of drawls himself, Matthew McConaughey, who has starred in the favorite films of both Scorsese and Nolan fans, but I personally always found him more believable as an unhinged goofball. I love this guy. He's just living in his own little world and doesn't care about what you think. All he wants to do is party. His carefree and optimistic view of the world will always be a lot of fun to watch, and it distracts me from the fact that this movie's pretty directionless. In short, The Beach Bum is Korine's Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. A wild spectacle that doesn't give two shits about what it wants to do, and is pretty much on autopilot the whole time. All of it while never changing its tone once. I mean, there's some conflict surrounding the death of Isla Fisher's character, but that's almost completely forgotten seconds after it happens. The entire movie just stays this happy-go-lucky, raunchy attitude throughout, and yet, it sort of feels right somehow. It's a feel-good movie in a sort of way, a nice romp through a world of drugs, sex, partying, Snoop Dogg, and most importantly, Snoop Dogg.
Watch out, there's a fucking alien right here, I told you!
You've been hit by, you've been struck by.
You know, come to think of it, I didn't expect to rank the movie this high since I only saw it once a year ago before this ranking. But if this is Korine's way of branching out from being typecasted as the disturbing movie guy, all I could say is... hee hee. Mr. Lonely is about a Michael Jackson and Marilyn Monroe impersonator going to a remote island in Scotland where impersonators are free to live their own lives and just do stuff. Oh hey, it's my biography! I was only 2 at the time, but still, it's my biography. I read once in a review for this that Korine always looks like he's reverse engineering on how a film is supposed to be made. Like, instead of thinking about the story first and leaving the visuals until later, Korine thinks about the visuals first, but just leaves the story on the back burner. And for the most part, I can kinda see that. This movie heavily focuses on how dedicated these impersonators really are. They never once break character, even when all hell breaks loose. And it could also act like an odd character study disguised as a satire of the people who idolize celebrities and the obsession with fame. And a weird concept like this can only be accomplished by Korine. Like, only he can make lines like,
"Sometimes when I look at you, you seem more like Adolf Hitler than Charlie Chaplin."
Feel natural in the context of a drama about finding an alternative after looking for fame fails. At least that's my interpretation. What could I say? I'm a stubborn, pretentious dickie. It can get pretty disturbing at the best of times, but that's almost par for the course for Korine at this point. If it's not disturbing, then what is the point? But still something that's worth watching. In conclusion, Mr. Lonely is a pretty underrated third effort, and so help me if I'm not casting a sequel as a Björk impersonator.
You magnificent bastard, I read your book!
Now, for the people who have been with me for a while, I've sort of made a living with talking about divisive projects and giving my general opinion on them. But I think it's high time to open what is considered to be the Pandora's box of divisiveness. Gummo was the first movie Korine had ever worked on. Nobody Counts Kids? Sorry. And even from the beginning, this guy wanted to seclude himself from aiming for your typical Hollywood pacing by removing the 3-act structure from the equation entirely, going for more of a character study except it jumps around in between several people's lives like a cat with ADHD on a trampoline, and is shot in several different styles, whether it be raw 32mm film or professional camera equipment. Now, this does seem like it could ruin any film, but it does in a way that's not just seamless, but makes overall sense in the context of what Korine is trying to say. I'm not entirely sure what the movie is saying, but I'm gonna say it's something along the lines of, "All is lost! All is lost!" This is one really dark movie, like beyond dark even for Korine. And this was the second movie he's ever worked on. Like, just because you're now friends with irreversible director Gaspar Noé doesn't mean you have to embody his ability to make me feel bad about myself. Hell, after the opening credits, the first thing we see is a kid drowning a cat in a barrel of water. Now, I'm not the first one to say that this movie was really difficult to get through. I mean, we've all seen bleak movies before, but Gummo just took it to a forbidden level of bleakness, touching upon drug addiction, poverty, violent emancipation, sexual abuse, animal abuse, racism. Any depraved thing you could think of is in this movie. All necessary things to base a cautionary tale over, but it goes to places that I don't even want to suddenly hint at to what's happening. It's supposed to be unwatchable, but even those who manage to stick with the film all the way through just feel worried for these people. Even characters that have done the most heinous things I feel sorry for. I feel for the situations that they're in, and I want their lives to get better in some way. I went to sleep sad because of this movie last night. That's how depressing this thing is. Gummo did what it was set out to do, and it's without a doubt Korine's best movie, but at the same time it's also the worst. It's an experiment in patience and gave me reactions that most shock movies wouldn't dream of having. Haha! Take that, Lucifer Valentine! You may have tried to gross us out with naked people eating bugs, but Harmony got to you first and actually put me off spaghetti for a month. Fuck you, you irredeemable asshole! No, really, I'm serious this time. That guy is messed up in the head, and I would be happy if the Vomit Gore trilogy just never existed. Anyways, what's at number 1?
How does it feel to be a loser? A what? A lifeguard!
I got jealous when Selena left the movie halfway through.
One of the evilest movies. James Franco is truly the Jared Leto of guys who want to be Jared Leto.
I can't believe this is how A24 decided to start their career as a studio.
What a cringe fest. When Selena Gomez's character said that this was the most spiritual place he'd ever seen, I couldn't help but laugh. You're in the state of Florida. Stop with this nonsense.
Spring Breakers is a brain-dead porno that I can only pray Charlie never watched before releasing Brat Deluxe. One of my first thoughts was, wow, only incels must think women are actually like this. Soon thereafter, I discovered the director met his now wife when he was 32 and she was 19. In hindsight, it seems to be more in the pedophile pervert range of audience. Neither hypothesis can really be refuted when this movie was obviously created entirely by men to caricaturize women as dumb bimbo sluts.
Yeah, I like this one. This was one of the first movies from the then rising studio A24, and if there was a talent weird enough to cement the company as a hotspot for crazy weirdos like Ari Aster or the Safdie brothers, then Harmony Korine would most definitely be the one to step up to the challenge. Is it too out there for some? Definitely. Is it too in your face with its social commentary? Absolutely. But it's also strangely comforting and gives you a chance to break free from normality that gives you a strange mix between an out-of-control party movie in the similar vein to Project X, an unapologetic satire of the at-the-time recently bankrupt Girls Gone Wild, and a bizarre art house crime thriller that makes the logic of rules non-existent. Even Selena Gomez was on board with this, stating this movie is a breath of fresh air, a chance to break free from her squeaky clean Disney image. And I think it worked out in her favor too, since Spring Breakers was a massive hit, making $30 million out of a measly $5, and launching A24 into the major limelight. It's hypnotic, crazy, and harsh, but most importantly, it's easily Harmony Korine's best movie. Except for that guy. I hate that guy. I swear, he's like the human equivalent to those head-on ads where they tell you to apply the product directly to the forehead over and over. God, I hated those ads. Also, Lights by Ellie Goulding, severely underrated song. And there we have it. Sure, I didn't like all of his films, but I sort of, even the ones I didn't like, I sort of appreciate them for going above and beyond with the new ideas that they have. Because that's what most of these films feel like. They feel like glued together ideas rather than cohesive plots. So, which I admire. That's kind of how I filmed CMF when I was still making it. It was a bunch of glued together ideas that I just formed a plot around. And Harmony, if you are watching this, I have to say, at the bottom of my heart, I am such a huge... Aha! You thought I forgot, didn't ya? Thank you for watching, make sure to leave a like, and I'll see you all later. Also, I get that this video is coming out in October, but I'm filming this in August, so it still counts. Right. I know what you're thinking. Well, actually, I don't know what you're thinking, but I'm just going to presume that I do anyways. Why am I doing a quick review for specifically Beyond when I didn't do it for the previous two? Well, that's because I'm in the wake of some madman that decided to upload the whole thing onto YouTube. It's probably not there by the time I upload this, but seeing that this was already there, I might as well get my quick thoughts on the movie out of the way right then and there while the thing is still up. Also, if I have to be honest here, it's pretty awesome that we're getting a VHS movie annually now. It's always been my favorite found footage franchise, in part due to my immense love for anthologies, and for how goddamn creative some of these concepts can be. Which, yeah, does lead to some segments that could be hit or miss at times, like Second Honeymoon from the first movie, No Wake from '85, and the entirety of Viral. But still, seeing that this was once the nichest of the niche when it comes to anthologies, seeing how huge this got in the wake of the 2010s is very comforting to see, especially as someone who loved the first two movies, and Viral was a thing that... Also, if you're wondering why my voice is like this at the moment, I sort of blew my vocal cords out for another video that I'm releasing in the near future, so get ready for that. It was certainly wild filming it, that's for sure. Anyways, on to the film itself. Beyond is interesting. It's laid out like this documentary about the discovery of aliens, and maybe it's because of my bias towards documentaries, but it's probably the first time in the entire franchise that I've liked the wraparound segment over the actual segments itself. To me, this is like Viral's Dante the Great, if it was done right. It's a fun way to build up tension with how uncertain everybody is about the alien causing all this destruction, and the payoff of it all is appropriately disturbing. Plus, I have to give points to any movie that acknowledges Orson Welles' 1939 War of the Worlds broadcast, which might be one of my favorite documented reports of mass hysteria ever. Yeah, just ever. I don't think anything's just gonna top that. As for the segments themselves, they're fine. They're not bad, but there's something about how everything is shot and paced that kind of throws me out in a loop. Like, they were originally going to be these standalone found footage movies, but Shudder sort of ran out of time and decided to squeeze them all into a VHS movie. That would sort of explain why almost every segment here completely contradicts its frame narrative, which I think was a similar sin that Viral made, and let's just say nobody should be committing any sins that Viral made. At least with 94 onwards, they had to work around the limitations that the studio gave them to make it look as crusty as possible because they weren't allowed to use actual analog camcorders. Here, it's shown that the quote-unquote proof is on a tape, so why does it look like it was all filmed off of an iPhone or Samsung? It makes no sense stylistically. Even if you remove that context, the zombie house raid segment was fine, the demon pop star one was fine, the rabid human dog was fine. It's all fine. Though I will say for the dog one that it's directed by the last person you would expect to make a horror short. Alvin! From Alvin and the Chipmunks! But it's no big surprise that the best segment of the movie, and the only one that has an actual chance to be as much of a VHS fan favorite as Safe Haven and 103198, belongs to Kate Siegel and Mike Flanagan. Hell yeah, the real masters of horror are here! Aside from, of course, the director of Thanksgiving. I've mentioned before in my 2023 year-end list that I have AstraZenophobia, which is a fear of getting abducted by aliens. A fear that was already established by the VHS 2-segment Slumber Party Alien Abduction, except unlike that segment, we get to see the inside of the alien ship, and oh my god, it's exactly what my nightmares foretold. This is terrifying. From the ship taking off, to the alien silhouette, to being the only segment in the entire film to feel as grainy as the VHS tapes it was filmed on. Yep, I am definitely not going to sleep tonight. That's my sleeping days well behind me at this point. Aside from that scariness, Beyond is the weakest modern VHS movie because of the segments going against the grainy feel of the other films and the title. but it still has a lot of creative ideas, decent effects, and graphic as hell deaths to keep it from being dull as dishwater. Anyways, thank you for watching. Make sure to like the video and to subscribe to be notified for when another video comes out. And I know that might be annoying for a lot of you, but what I've been hearing from other people telling y'all to like and subscribe does actually work, so if you could do that, it'd be much appreciated. And lastly, have you been noticing how many weird sequels we've been getting as of late? Not counting this one, of course, but from the top of my head, we've gotten a sequel to Beetlejuice, Joker, The Platform, and Rosemary's Baby in the span of a month. And that's not even mentioning the other sequels that we're going to be getting, like Gladiator 2, which already makes no sense, Lord of the Rings 4, which makes even less sense, 28 Years Later, which... okay, I could kind of see that working, but then there's Resurrection of the Christ, a sequel to Passion of the Christ. I have made a very stupid decision today. Just this morning, as I was getting ready for college, I tripped and fell onto my camera, and I accidentally got it stuck to me. But, hey, I suppose while I'm here, I guess I could talk about a few found footage films, considering that I'm stuck doing this stupid confessional parody. Like, this wasn't even my idea, this just happened. What the hell is wrong with me? No matter what you thought of it when it first came out, you could not deny how much of a massive deal the Blair Witch Project was. Released in 1999 about 3 student filmmakers getting lost in the woods and getting punked out by an unseen demonic force, this movie was so unlike anything that came before it, with some exceptions, that it spawned an ARG weeks before the film came out, several fan theories on the film's unexplained events, so many references and parodies that can make your head spin 66 times before getting sent to quiet time in the corner, with Mike, a sequel the following year which was mostly a mockumentary on the craze behind the movie that was so filled with plot holes that even the film's title never comes into play, and a 2016 remake with decent enough scares but removed all the ambiguity that made the original special. Like, you get to see what the witch looks like in this version. No. So yeah, it's no question that we're going to be taking a look at a few found footage films today, but hopefully I can do it in a way where it doesn't look like I'm sniffing you the whole time. What the hell have you been doing last night? Thus, with that movie's success came the rise of the found footage movie genre. And to be honest, I can never forgive it for it. Now, don't get me wrong, I adore the Blair Witch Project. There is a pretty good reason as to why I call it the real deal found footage movie. Always replicated, but never duplicated. But like with every other money-making genre, they oversaturated to the point where doing a film entirely in the Saving Private Ryan shaky cam isn't seen as unique anymore and more so a desperate attempt to try and hop on an already doomed bandwagon. I am looking at you in particular, The Gallows, Grave Encounters, The Pyramid, The Last Exorcism. Actually, I kind of like The Last Exorcism, I'm just being mean at this point. Now, I'm not looking for any bad films here because... Like, come on, I've been watching too many bad films as of late. I deserve a break from them. I want to instead focus on the ones that I personally think are way too good to be buried behind the vomit-inducing equivalent to Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. See what I did there? So we're not going to be talking about the no-brainer picks when it comes to good found footage movies like Wreck, Paranormal Activity, Host, or As Above, So Below. The Visit Unfriended might count in this case too, but science hasn't really come back on that one, and it's kind of debatable if they could be considered good movies to begin with. Unfriended especially because of it, well, being unfriended. And I don't even have to stick to the whole tried and true I have to film everything type of plot either. Let's have fun with this, come on. So let's start with our first film, which I'm sure will be oodles of fun. Man Bites Dog, or C'est arrivé près de chez vous, damn, that was a much cleaner take than I was expecting, is a beyond darkly comedic mockumentary following the escapades of longtime serial killer Ben, as he is interviewed by a film crew for, as Wikipedia likes to call it, a fly-on-the-wall documentary, as he talks about his family, friends, hobbies, and killing people in the most graphic and disgusting details that he could possibly describe. Like, seriously, these deaths are brutal. Maybe not Terrifier 2 levels of masochistic, but the violence on display here did give the movie the dreaded NC-17 rating, so yeah, this movie could get pretty disgusting at the best of times.
Prends le crime de la guerre, par exemple. Hein? Le crime des toilettes. De quoi on a parlé dans les journaux? De qui? Allez. Allez, de qui on a parlé dans les journaux? Du dentiste. Du mécanicien dentiste. Mais Madame Pipi, on en a pas tiré une ligne. Pas une ligne, mon vieux, rien.
I have no qualms in saying that the violent rampages are easily the most memorable highlight of the film. I mean, how can you forget scenes like this when they're shot so raw and brutalized? It's like if the documentary The Bridge was about a sentient bridge that killed people. Okay, that went nowhere. Either that or the film's main lead, Ben, played by Benoit Poirot. I hope I pronounced that right. I am not French. In a character study as brutal as this, Ben would be the last guy that you would consider as likable. Sure, he murders people, but he's also very funny and talks about killing people in a very passionate way. Gee, I wonder why. It's almost like he's a veteran serial killer or something. It's almost fitting that a movie as nasty as this is from the producer Remy Balvois, whom I wasn't able to find that much information on, but from what I was able to gather in time for this video, he was fined along with 3 other people for throwing a cream pie in the face of Bill Gates, and on a less humorous note, sadly took his own life in 2006. Again, it's not much, but you could kind of tell that this guy was a bit of a rebel, and this film in particular captures it in spades. He didn't want to make a traditional movie about a serial killer, he wanted to go that extra mile with this mockumentary style of filmmaking that elevates realism in a way that wasn't imaginable back in the 90s, especially for France. This was completely new in that era. But it's not just all that that makes this one of my favorite films of all time. It's also really damn funny. I mean, it's very dark, of course, but the delivery of everything is just so dry, and every line of dialogue sounding very nonchalant even during the murder scenes. You could say they have a very sick sense of humor, but I can't help but to get a kick out of it. Bottom line, for a film that predates the Blair Witch Project by a couple of years, give or take, it's really good. But with how much it banks on realism to get a general shock out of you, especially with its sense of humor, I can definitely understand why most people wouldn't get into it. The old jumper stunk of weed. The movie begins with tits and a dick, so that's how you know that you're watching a VHS movie. I'm just joking with y'all. Unlike the original, this isn't what most of the film's going to be, thank God. But we do see a kid jerking off later on, so there goes that opportunity for me to give this movie a 10 out of 10. Honestly, none of that really matters, because for a sequel to a niche found footage horror movie, it's pretty good. Better than good. This movie's fantastic. This entire movie is such a love letter to the found footage subgenre, and they never hold back with what they can do with their limitations, with most of these segments being some of the best in the entire franchise. Phase 1 clinical trials is a nice juxtaposition of the first segment of VHS 1, but instead of being in a pair of glasses, it's in someone's eyeball, and also has this expert pacing that keeps you on your toes for both segments. But this one has no Lily in it, so automatic 0. Ride in the Park brings a completely new premise to the table of several hitchhikers turning into zombies and terrorizing a birthday party, which is already pretty funny. And we've seen zombies communicate with each other before, but seeing one of them snap out of their zombified trance, looking at the damage he's caused to everything, and then shooting himself out of guilt, that is beyond new for not just zombie media, but horror in general. And it came from this movie of all things. Safe Haven is a fan favorite and my personal best segment in the whole film, where our lead joins a cult and tries to get out before things go horribly wrong. Things go horribly wrong. And finally, Slumber Party Alien Abduction, despite the title giving away all the spoilers for free, take it, it's all I have, is massively scaled for the small budget that they were given and has the most improvised feel out of them all. Similar to how the Blair Witch Project had a very improvisational tone to it. which is hilarious considering that one of the segments here is directed by Eduardo Sanchez, the co-director of the Blair Witch Project. Every step this film takes gets crazier and crazier as it goes on, and most moments can range from being creatively insane to downright terrifying. As a matter of fact, I would go as far as to say that this might be my favorite sequel to a movie ever made, but Britannia Hospital? Hello? And for those who are wondering why I haven't mentioned the wraparound segment Tape 49 yet, it's fine.
Today is gonna be epic!
I remember seeing Spree in a time where I desperately wanted to see some new horror films, and it might be without a doubt the scariest movie we've covered here so far. Because when I was scrolling down the cast on Letterboxd, the site almost tricked me into thinking that Doug Walker was in this. Also, Frankie Grande. In a time where becoming the next influencer is bigger than ever, Spree, while having a lot of energy going for it and has a lot of pretty great performances throughout, acts like a cautionary tale of sorts. A tale of one guy named Kirk Kunkel, member of the Funkel family, who is so desperate on becoming famous online that he would follow every single current trend and go as far as to murder people who criticize him. Damn. This movie alone is why I always try to avoid using the word content as much as possible, because I don't want to put myself in the same ballpark as Steve the Narcissist over here. This is another example of a character that I really want to hate, like actively despise. But Joe Keery plays Kurt with so much passion and delightful yet spiteful anger that, unlike Ben from Man Bites Dog, I kinda do hate him by the halfway point. Kurt is a narcissist who shouldn't be admired or liked. This guy is clearly only obsessed with himself and never shies away from putting down people that are clearly more popular than him. Also, he has a disgusting haircut. Damn, he's ticking off all the boxes today. Besides the fact that this is clearly a character study of someone who has no regrets with being a murderous clout chaser, and the sad reality of both the live stream comments and the ending with a bunch of 4chan users citing Kurt as a hero a la Divine in Female Trouble, it's a very cleverly edited film too, splicing several different live streams from several different perspectives into this cacophony of madness, and even the inspired decision to intercut Kurt's death with an earlier scene of him celebrating 50k viewers by talking about how he got what he deserved. A perfect bit of irony considering what it's intercut with. Top that off with some really funny performances like Sashir Samata as Jesse, several actual social media stars, and David motherfucking Arquette of Scream fame, and you've got yourself an unforgettably surreal companion piece to our current reality that sadly gets more true with every passing day. Burn in hell, Kurt, and rest in peace to all his victims respectively.
If I could drive a spaceship.
Apollo 18. Yes, bring out your constellation maps to Cancer the Crab and thermal ray photos of a star that's set to go supernova any second now, because we're talking about space in this segment. Yeah, this was one pretty divisive film upon release, and still kind of is to this day. It's no surprise that most films that focus more on the realistic exploration side of space would always get the short end of the stick. Space Cowboys, Ad Astra, Moon, Lucy in the Sky. Hell, there's even a sequel to 2001: A Space Odyssey that almost no one talks about, focusing on the investigation behind the abandoned Discovery spaceship. Even though every single one of us in the audience knew exactly what happened to everybody on board, yeah, it's a pretty pointless watch and I don't exactly recommend it. But back to Apollo 18's divisiveness, the most common complaint remedied against it is the fact that it's way too slow. Really? That's the biggest complaint. Alright, in everyone's defense, I do see where they're coming from. It's a very slow movie about the discovery of aliens that takes forever to get to the aliens part, and most of it is tonally uninteresting. But I feel like calling a movie like this boring because of it being slow is kind of hypocritical as a film buff, considering that one of the most beloved movies of the 20th century is 12 Angry Men. Pretty alright movie, but it's literally just several racist old people doing nothing but argue for 80 or so minutes. I'll just come out and say it, love Sidney Lumet's work, but I just think 12 Angry Men is overrated. Although I will say if I did have an issue with any of the film, it felt like it was cut down a little too much. Like, the Russian cosmonaut's death was cut entirely, leaving the method of his death entirely unknown, which okay, that would be just fine if he just disappeared and we only got traces of what happened to him, similar to Josh in the Blair Witch Project, but knowing how gnarly his corpse looked when the others do find him, like, come on, you can't just leave a thing like that ambiguous. I want to see what happens. And there was even an alternate ending where the aliens gang up on one of the ships as the spaceship loses oxygen, which, I'll admit, would have been a much scarier ending than the one we got. Seriously, they just crash into each other and that's it. Honestly, the only reason I liked Apollo 18 as much as I did is the presentation. The entire movie was shot through old 70s camera lenses, which I think is IMDb Trivia's way of saying it was just shot on 16mm, and it works really well for the tone it's going for, making this feel like actual found footage. Not like found footage as in, oh, I found a camera in the middle of nowhere and this is just footage we got off the SD card. No. Like, this was hidden away for several years to cover up any form of conspiracies going around, and only now has it been unveiled to the public. It feels like that kind of found footage. Also, yes, haha, let's have a bit of a laugh here, feel free to get those jokes out your system, but all that aside, I wouldn't be surprised if someone was actually tricked into thinking that this was really shot in space. Like, sure, the effects blending doesn't always work, but just look at all this. This genuinely looks like it was filmed on the moon. I like this movie. I know that I've disagreed with the common consensus before, but this is actually really good. Probably enough to stand up there as one of the modern horror greats. Huh. I wonder what else this director's done. Alright, let's see here. Gonzalo Lopez Galago. Alright, so, American Star came out this year, starring Ian McShane. Wait a minute, you mean that Ian McShane? The friggin' Great Bobensky Ian McShane? Huh! Holy crap, it is! Friggin' Mr. Bobensky starred in a movie that was done by the same director as Apollo 18. Weird. And if it wasn't for the fact that everybody, and I mean everybody, wanted a piece of that found footage pie, this would have done really well in the late 2010s, especially with the major evolution of social media. Take, for example, Chumbawamba. Yeah, sure, you may only know these guys as the people who made the song about getting knocked down and getting back up again, but these guys didn't start off as people who made tump thumping. They were next-level political activists who hated Live Aid because they saw it as a sellout move, and the major label of EMI to the point where they made a song for a compilation album called Fuck EMI. But they did learn to have a lot of fun every once in a while. Like, sure, the political leanings are all still there in every single song, but they go in so many directions with it, like going entirely in a cappella, electronic, having surreal album covers, and even holding the longest album name. Not for long. And because of that, they lasted a lot longer than other punk rock bands from that era. Take, for example, The Clash ended up sitting out the last 5 years of Thatcher's ruling because they were all so far up their own asses with being non-conformities that they came out with The Monster Under My Bed at night. And Rage Against the Machine stayed pretty consistent with their style, well, consistent to the point of being repetitive, so much that they ended up lasting only 4 albums, effectively sitting out the entire Bush administration. And putting that analogy into place, I'm not saying that there are no good modern found footage films. As a matter of fact, there's a lot more than you think. Pose came out during the worldwide house arrest, but was still an effective and comforting use of all that spare time. Infrared was also pretty funny, not just because it had Mark from The Room in it as our main lead, but also manages to keep pretty consistent with mocking how desperate paranormal investigation streamers are. I love Late Night with the Devil, it's so weird. And the VHS franchise is still going strong after all these years, with the most recent one, Beyond, coming out last month. Not to mention analog horror series like Local 58, Angel Hair, Vita Carnus, and the Monument Mythos, which managed to create these massive yet effective world-ending horror stories without even showing anything. As a matter of fact, here on the left, or right, depending on if the footage mirrors itself in post, here is my definitive list of my top 10 favorite found footage movies. Time can only tell when found footage will come back in style. Like, sure, we're not getting as many of these types of films as we did a decade ago, but that doesn't mean it's entirely extinct. I still have hope for it. And who knows, maybe one day, it'll have its time in the spotlight one last time. this up. Son of a bitch. Alright, I have some good news and I have some bad news. The good news is that Terrifier 4 has officially been renewed for next year, and the bad news is that Chucky got cancelled after its third season. I don't know, maybe it's because Don Mancini heard that I was making a John Waters ranking and wanted to bank out as soon as possible. I don't know. But you know what's even better is the news. And the news is those two have nothing to do with what I'm talking about today, so instead I'm just going to talk about Death Grips again. Think of this as the Death Grips Worst to Best Part 2. It was the entry that wasn't good enough to be in the other video. So, anyone ever heard of JPEGmafia? Now, I have to be in the utmost of my honesty here, and this is kind of humiliating as someone who has been typecast as the weird movie / weird music guy, but I don't think I have ever listened to a JPEGmafia album all the way through, apart from maybe that one collaboration he did with Danny Brown. But even with that, I only listened to that because I was really bored one day and I need something to listen to on the bus ride home. And admitting this to everybody means that I'm now under the pressure of being called both a Resident Evil and JPEGmafia virgin. Joke's on those suckers. I have a shield. But I will say this about the tracks that I have listened to from them. They're bizarre. Like, really bizarre. He's labeled as experimental hip-hop, which obviously means that the floodgates for Death Grips comparisons are going to be all over the damn place. And I mean, I do see where people are coming from. Barrington does kind of look like Stefan Burnett.
How the fuck do I look like MC Riot? Like, come on, yo. Like, really? That shit is racist. It's bullshit. I have, yo, fuck Death Grips fans.
Oh. Sorry, Mr. Hendricks. But even with that, I'd probably say that this guy is a lot more than just a Death Grips wannabe. Mainly because, well, sure, the samples and beats are as chaotic as the definition can be, but there's also elements of R&B and vaporwave sprinkled in alongside it. And they are a lot more varied than anything the Grips has done for the past couple of years. Also, at least Barrington is still releasing albums. But my personal favorite way of telling a music artist's worth is if they end up making their own movie. And luckily, in Barrington's case, he did. Kinda, sorta, it's complicated. Dark-Skinned Manson, named after JPEG's second mixtape with the same name, is basically just that. A mixtape of people doing stuff. I've been watching experimental movies for like 3 to 4 years now, and even I can't tell you entirely what this is. Hell, not even Letterboxd can give me an explanation as to what's in front of me right now, and they usually have a synopsis for everything. Self-Portrait from 1969, directed by Yoko Ono. The film consists of a single 42-minute shot of the semi-erect penis of John Lennon. Okay. Speaking of erect wieners, I don't know how much I'm gonna be able to show for this one because I don't know how to put this in the simplest way possible. It's porn. Somehow, out of nowhere, like black magic, this is the third movie I'm covering on this channel where 90% of it is just skull fucking. I swear none of this is intentional. We already have enough outed creepers in the world as it is. Hell, one of them got a pretty sick song based on them this year. Now I'm gonna make this perfectly clear. This is by far the weirdest movie to come out of any musician, and trust me, I've seen K-12. But I do like how balls to the walls everything is in a strange sort of way. Between all the overlay effects going on here, as well as that random as hell JPEG logo flashing up every once in a while, it's certainly trippy, but it's also fascinating to see unfold, especially since it's not even that long, only clocking in at 36 Minnie Mouses. Oh, wait, that's supposed to say minutes? That's all I really have to say on the matter. I mean, I could talk about the historical significance and where this is placed in Harrington's discography, but 1, I have not listened to the guy's entire back catalog, and 2, I have a much bigger video planned for next week and I really need the energy. Besides, you're probably more curious about the times where I was a little... Yeah, that. Good evening, creepers and torturers, and welcome to this year's Halloween Review-a-thon. I am your host, the guy in the mask from the Death Grips ranking, and today I am not going to hide anything for shit. Now, I don't want to sound tough. As a matter of fact, I'm more of a coward. But I always find myself getting confused as to why I never really got scared of any pieces of media when I was younger. Like, I wasn't scared of the pink elephants from Dumbo, I wasn't scared of the walrus from Pingu. Hell, that whole acid tunnel sequence from Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory barely even got a reaction out of me. Which honestly brought a heaping dose of surprise to my younger self when I did get scared by something, and that's something that I want to focus on today. Now keep in mind that most of these things I am not scared of anymore. It's just going to be pieces of media that my younger self, aged from 5 to 13, would find scary. I mean, there is one thing that scared me when I was younger and still kinda scares me even today, but I'm going to put a pin in that and come back to that later. Anyways, what are we starting with?
Hello?
Oh god, no! I'm back in the cupboard again, you bastard! Lettuce is an obscure British kids game show that I vividly remember watching when I was younger, mostly out of fear. The show scared me when I was a child, honest, legitimately. It really did scare me, mainly because I was 100% convinced that this was all really happening and how the news wasn't all over it by now. Also, why do these game shows always seem to eternally punish their kid contestants upon losing? It seems oddly sadistic, but this is coming from the same channel that aired Animals at Farthing Woods, so I wouldn't put it past them at this point. So for a very few people who aren't aware, the show follows a set of 3 kids who get kidnapped by one of the escape rooms from Cube, and have to complete a collection of challenges one by one in order to defeat a Spy Kids-looking Megamind offspring and return to Earth. This was a weird show, and pretty innovative for its time too, with more of a virtual tabletop style going towards it. And even the guy playing the titular character of Ludus is having an absolute blast.
Yep, I've turned the friends and family of 3 Earth twerps into holograms. And now, I'm virtually horrible.
Now where is my dehydration gun? But it also has implications that the contestants' family members are also being held hostage, and if they lose, they're forever trapped in the Blue Tumors game. I bet a few people were emotionally scarred for life because of this show. Both the people watching it and the people competing in it. Just the thought of being trapped in a perpetual state for all eternity, all because little Timmy failed at playing the silver ball from Soho down to Brighton, is admittedly spine-chilling and a bit much for a game show aimed at kids.
Lose, and they'll be uploaded into my game. Forever.
Why do we still even have that covered? Anyways, I would like to think of Ludus as my introduction into sci-fi horror, because Jesus Christ, I am not going to sign up to it if those are the conditions. I love my family too much to do that. Speaking of sci-fi horror, Monster House. Because I don't think anything about that movie was human. Monster House! Remember that movie? The film about an old man who's married to a house that kills people, and as soon as a group of kids decide to investigate the house to see what's up with it? Yeah, me neither. I remember really liking this movie when I was wee, and even if the animation hasn't aged the best, I still think it's a solid enough movie to get you into that fun Halloween spirit. Except for one singular scene after Nebuchadnezzar suffers a heart attack in the house vowing revenge against our leads. Yeah, sure, it's a dream sequence about the house trying to get our lead, but did you expect for the shadow of a hand to come out of the house to get our lead? Didn't think so. Yeah, it was a lot more intense than I was expecting from a movie like this, because I never saw anything like that scene before. It's a visually abstract way of portraying TJ's worries about the house being alive, and the hand foreshadowing the appearance of Constance later on, who was accidentally killed in a cement freak accident, and her soul possessing the house Nebuchadnezzar was building. Nowadays, I can definitely appreciate a lot more now that I'm a full-time horror fanatic. But man, when I first watched this, I wasn't ready for it. I woke up in a cold sweat thinking about this scene once. It was horrible. And you know what else makes me wake up in a cold sweat? Anything by Damien Lynch. It says David. David Lynch. I can see Next up on the list we have Dumbland, a 2002 amateurish animated web series created by famous surrealist provocateur David Lynch. Yeah, David Lynch. You know, the most intelligent filmmaker to mix sexy subtlety with complicated and terrifying surrealism. The guy behind psychological masterpieces like Mulholland Drive, Blue Velvet, and Inland Empire. He made a crude cartoon containing fart jokes and profusive swearing that is so non sequitur that even South Park would think it's too stupid. How did this come to be and why? I don't know, he just had a lot of free time on his hands. Okay, to tell you the truth, I never really watched this one when I was younger. I was only made vaguely aware of it by a Phantom Strider kill count. But it still looked very eerie. Each character jitters back and forth between the two frames that they were gifted, and it gives off a pretty eerie aura about it. Even the dialogue could go from repetitive and crude to downright bizarre. As is with the case when a random retailer shows up to the main character's house to offer him some product, and then he gets pelted in the face, causing his neck to break, and his dying words are about repeating the Gettysburg Address. Sure, it's not groundbreaking by any stretch of the means, but Lynch does always find a way to think outside the box. Which is kind of a shame since the series is shit. Whatever you think or thought Dumbland was gonna be is absolutely correct. The humor is lowbrow and stupid. The plot is on par with 1930s Dadaism to the point where it's pretty much non-existent. And the animation is... Wait, is it even animation? Okay, let's get the elephant out of the room for a moment and talk about the animation. It's somewhat fascinating, and I mean fascinating in all the wrong ways possible. It's nauseatingly simple to the point where there's no color and each character model only has about 4 to 5 frames. It's a style that kind of reminds me of 12 Ounce Mouse in a way, which is not surprising at all considering that the show was heavily influenced by most of David Lynch's movies. And true to fashion, despite it being so simple, it's kinda disturbing. I could also talk about the story, the characters, writing, voice acting, so on and so forth, but there's very little to add outside of them adding to the overall odd atmosphere. And out of his entire filmography, which also includes Eraserhead, a Netflix short film about a detective interrogating a monkey, and a sitcom, this has to easily be the strangest thing that he's ever done. Outside of a music career. Seriously. Yeah, sorry about that. I didn't know how to get to the next segment. Has anybody ever heard of a little show called Trapdoor? I wouldn't be surprised if you didn't. It's a fairly underground, macabre British stop-motion series from the 80s whose wild selection of eccentric characters includes a cynical skull, an abused spider, a kind-hearted brawn that came from the trapdoor itself, and an angry blue chef with a name that only post-rock fans would love. This was introduced to me at a very young age by my own mom, who also grew up with the series, and it was around the same time when I was getting into much darker shows like the works of Tim Burton, so this was right up my alley. And I have no one but her to thank since this series was spectacular. The animation was eccentric and colorful, it had a wickedly dark yet lighthearted sense of humor.
Touch one of them. Look at that! He's eating his breakfast!
Some unbelievably creative character designs, and a pretty fast pace with each episode only being 4 minutes in length, making an entire season's worth a fairly quick watch. Also, the theme song is really damn good. It was a true landmark for British stop-motion animation at the time, and I could go as far as to say that every episode is worth your time. Okay, maybe except for the one where Burke throws Strut down the trapdoor because it gave me Vietnam flashbacks to Pal for Gary from SpongeBob, but outside of that, I loved every last episode of this thing. But they just had to jump scare me with the final episode now, did they? Yep, many sleepless nights were caused by the very final episode of the show, appropriately titled The Big Red Thing, because it's the same guy who terrorized Burke in the very first episode, which is a nice full circle moment. Spoiler alert for a 40-year-old show at this point, Jesus Christ. Barok gets pelted in the face by the thing, causing him to show a bit of anger for the first time. They get into a cliffside fight, and they both die. Okay, that's a pretty depressing way to end things, but it was revealed to be a fake out after the credits. So, cool, Rogue's alive. So, why is there still 29 seconds left? Oh, jeez. This ending has been bothering me for years now. I mean, my best guess is that they were setting up for the Big Red Thing's potential reappearance in a third season, but there never was a third season. The show ended there. I mean, come to think of it, I'm not even sure if everyone survived or not. Did they die? Did they escape? Is Spike dead? What did Carrie see that scared her so much? What happened to Truman after he left his own show? How was Light outsmarted that easily by a bunch of 5th graders? Was Jack Torrance always the caretaker of the Overlook? Did the atmosphere on Mars really open up, or is this something that's happening in Arnold's head before he died? And what do you mean that's Stalking's a demon? I know it was effective enough to make me remember the show as a whole, even though there are several episodes that are definitely guilty of that. As a matter of fact, I almost went with a Splund for this list because of how disturbing his character design was, but I don't know, I always thought it was more weird than creepy. Never mind, I take it back. I probably should have talked about the Splund instead. But those last 20 seconds were maybe a little too effective. I mean, effective enough that I had a bit of trouble sleeping for the next few days. But hey, could have been a lot worse, John. Much, much worse. Nickelodeon is a company that I've always had a huge love-hate relationship with. Don't get me wrong, they've come out with some excellent TV shows in the past 30 years, but they're also known for pumping out really, really good TV shows. Also known for either milking the same 20 episodes of SpongeBob over and over while making one of the messiest strings of continuity in cartoon history by making several spin-offs and movies, one of which Hillenburg was entirely against because it simply made no sense, or they just squeeze out 8 different projects of the same IP in the span of a year. Like, come on, guys, not even Drake is that petty. Hey guys, I know you're not very happy about the current state the show's in right now, but hey look, we have 2 movies that Netflix produced that you might enjoy. And hey, just in case you're very sick of seeing this family, we also have this spin-off of one of the lesser characters that also got its Netflix-produced movie. And hey, if you're sick of animation in general, why not try out this series in live action that also has its set of movies? You like these ones now, right? Right? Hey, this is Chris Savino. Go home, you're drunk. Where was I going with this? Oh yeah, Yellow Cheese God. I love SpongeBob. At least I'm trying to love it. Nickelodeon's been making it a lot harder as of late, but I loved it well enough. But I was never a huge fan of it, more so a casual viewer who was more into the zanier elements and running gags throughout episodes. So when something like SB129 comes along, I felt like I was being mugged. It was such a drastic tonal shift for me when I was younger, going from your typical Bikini Bottom antics to Squidward being flash frozen into the future and now has to find his way back.
Holy crap!
From the chrome future of Bikini Bottom to teleporting 2-headed Patricks to facing off against the duo's more primal self, that's already bizarre enough. But then the handle of the time machine breaks and Squidward ends up here. Wherever here is. For a while I had no clue what to make of this scene. I mean, the switch did land on it being far into the future when it broke, but never how far. So, does this mean that Squiddy here has gone so far into the future that he broke through space and time and ended up in some sort of limbo? Or is this him presumably walking around in a place where the concept of time has ceased completely? The end of the universe, if you will. But who knows, maybe this means absolute dick and Hillenburg just wanted an excuse to reset the whole episode by the end. Maybe that's why the time machine ended up sending Squidward back to present day by the end, even though it was clearly broken. But even with that, what scares me the most is when Squidward ends up finding the time machine and him wishing to go home. All I was wondering is what's outside that door? If the guy managed to break through limbo to return to the time machine, then what's under limbo? Karsten Rundquist did a pretty fantastic analysis of this episode that tried to tie the events of it all back to Friedrich Nietzsche's studies on eternal recurrence, and I highly recommend you check it out. It's very well researched and definitely succeeds at the attempt of making sense of the bleak surrealism on play here. But still, what is behind that door? Is it bears? Is it a dimension of bears? I don't know, I pretty much have to accept anything at this point. But wait, that means... So bottom line, how am I more scared of this now than anything I've covered in this video so far? Well, simply because I'm a massive pussy. That's it, go home. Again, sorry if I didn't cover any internet-related ones for this. I'm trying to stay well away from that well as much as possible, because if I was to talk about the things on the internet that scarred me when I was younger, we'd be here all day. But if you're wondering about that pin from earlier, don't worry. Enlightenment will come next week. Oh God. Alright, what are we critiquing today? I do love prints. Cats. Based on the Andrew Lloyd Webber musical from 1981, which in itself was based on a T.S. Eliot book from 1939, Cats is a CG horror musical that was released in 2019 to rapturous screams of terror up to and including mine. Remember the last video when I teased you with a movie that scared me as a youngin' but still does to this day? Here you go. Now, for some of you who aren't aware, I have kind of a kindred history with this movie. I first found out about it when me and my family were going to see Maleficent Mistress of Evil, or as I like to call it, Disney's less good version of Game of Thrones. But just before the film started, the trailer sour bombed its way into theaters, and I have not been the same person since. Laughable. Since then, I've sort of become fascinated with everything about it. Like, yeah, it gave me nightmares of the Cronenbergian reject versions of the Manson family, but hey, don't knock it until you analyze it. And Universal was really banking on this to do well, with it having a ton of big names behind it, like Taylor Swift, James Corden, Jason Derulo, Judi Dench, and Ian McKellen, but also had a brand new song written by Lord Webber himself called Beautiful Ghosts, that was sure to be a big hit at award season, and award-winning director Tom Hooper at the helm. Yeah, Tom Hooper, the same guy who directed the annoyingly hilarious Les Miserables adaptation, and managed to win Best Picture with The King's Speech. Surely this is a really good thing to have on his resume, right? This ended up being the last movie he ever directed. Suffice to say, but the whole premiere was a disaster, bringing in only $1 million out of an unnecessary $100 million, and had to be taken out of the Oscars for Your Consideration campaign because of the bad press it got. I don't know why. That's mainly the reason why I'm not going to go through this film shot by shot like I did with Anna and the Moods, because if I did, it would just be nothing but 2 hours of me going... So for the sake of my sanity, most of this is just going to be me trying to understand the legacy that the movie left behind, and why it's honestly not a big surprise that this was the final nail in the coffin for big budget movie musicals. Like, this was already based on a musical that pretty much had no cohesion or plot, so what the hell were we expecting? Well... Back Back in the early 90s, Steven Spielberg, the same guy who made every film student's favorite poster and the Film Buff's Guide to Instant Sex, met up with Andrew Lloyd Webber during the height of his career and was interested in turning Cats into an animated movie under the Amblimation umbrella. Ultimately, it never happened because even the master of people's imaginations couldn't figure out how to form a free-act structure out of the film while keeping the original songs intact. Amblimation would shortly shut down the following year, and the only surviving part of that version would be a few pieces of concept art that honestly looks pretty awesome, if I gotta be honest with myself. It wasn't until 2012, when Les Miserables became a big hit, that restarted the hullabaloo that a Cats adaptation would be in the works. And you could probably put two and two together with what happened from there. Gross. But it wasn't without some key changes from the musical as well, the most notable being the drastic changes to the characters of both Victoria and Macavity. Let's talk about Victoria first, because it's what the movie would have wanted, because this film really likes Victoria. And I can honestly see why. It's my favorite Nickelodeon sitcom. I mean, iCarly was good too, Drake and Josh as well is a masterpiece, and Sam and Cat definitely, I mean, sure, it's not as good as Victorious, but it was a decent enough spin-off, definitely didn't deserve to get cancelled after one season, and, you know, it was kind of like a jumping-on point for Ariana Grande's career, and without that, we wouldn't have got songs like Greedy, so that was pretty good. Damn it, I'm still talking about Cats! And she's also played by one of the no-name actors here that I actually remember the name of. It's Francesca Hayward. In the original, she only shows up for about 30 seconds just to do a ballet routine before disappearing into the background for the sake of... Now she's portrayed as this sort of fish out of water, a character thrown quite literally into this cultish world of wildness and eccentricity. And honestly, she's fine. She doesn't really have that much of a character to build off of in the first place, but outside of a few dance moves that would have looked more impressive if she wasn't covered with Dr. Monroe's pubic hair, for someone who is supposed to give in to the madness by the end, she's really boring. Victoria only works as a plot device and nothing else. She literally has no sense of character at all, even less so than in the original Broadway. Oh, but she sings that song? The one that was nominated for an Oscar but had to pull out at the last minute? Look, I think I've waited this long to make a sex joke. I think I did pretty well. But then there's Macavity, played by DJ Idris himself, Idris Elba. Now, unlike Victoria, Macavity has a tiny bit more of a presence in the Broadway version, set up as this sort of con cat, someone who you really shouldn't mess with in the wild. To put it briefly, he's pretty much an anti-Jellicle. He would stop at nothing to get to the heavy side layer and would even go as far as to kidnap and kill old Deuteronomy just to do so. Jesus, man. And the film does a little better with how he's portrayed, and we actually do get to see him as a threat, rather than him showing up at the end to fight Munkelstrap and then electrocuting himself to death. Hey, it happens. He's surprisingly more fleshed out here than I remember, and honestly makes for some of the more entertaining parts of the film. I'm not saying Driss is great here, far from it, but he made the experience more worthwhile, definitely more entertaining than the rest of the cast, that's for sure.
The Napoleon of crime. My cavity, there's no one like my cavity.
Except for that, though, no words. But at least those two have a bit of a presence. The ones that somehow have even less presence here, despite being sprinkled throughout most of the movie, is the celebrities. Now, I do have to give this film a slight bit of credits. They do focus a lot less on the big names and give lesser-known actors a chance in the spotlight. Like hell, Mr. Mistopheles ends up saving the whole day by the end, and I don't even know the guy who plays him. But out of every single big name in Hollywood, they decided to go with the ones that only mothers would know that would never say no to anything. And Ian McKellen and Judi Dench as well, but that's only because they're old, senile, and don't know how to choose good film roles anymore. Now let's take a look at some of these doomed roles, shall we? James Corden plays Buster Jones, whose character was already a cheap recycling of Potiphar from Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, and somehow looked even more terrifying in the initial trailer than in the final cut. God, this movie looks unfinished. It's just him doing his usual boring fat cat routine, just as a cat. Even Rebel Wilson's first line when he shows up sounds oddly spiteful towards him. Like, even she's sick of his usual shit.
Good evening, all.
Oh no, look what the cat dragged in.
Speaking of Rebel Wilson, she plays Jenny Annie Dodds, whose name sounds like someone stuttering while they're having a stroke. She's responsible for one of the more scarier scenes in the movie that I'm shocked managed to escape my childhood traumas video. The eating of humanoid cockroaches, the Gumby cat tearing off her skin, the disorientating editing, topped off of the already scary looking visual effects. She looks like Heathcliff's ass! Jason Derulo plays the Rum-Tum Tugger, who in the original was portrayed as a pimp that potentially had homosexual connections with Mr. Mistopheles, which also added to why the musical was such a queer icon, especially in a time where that sort of thing wasn't universally accepted yet. So in the year of our Lord 2019, you'd think they would lean more into that now that they were in an era where that sort of thing is more accepted. Nope. He, as well as Mistopheles, get their no homo moments with Victoria, just in case she wasn't annoying enough. The best part, however, is after Tugger's musical number, he randomly hisses at Hudson, runs off, and we don't see him again for the rest of the film. I mean, we do see him at the Addressing of Cats epilogue.
It's party time! With your permission.
But that's about it. We never see him again. Yeah, you know exactly what this means. Tugger is pulling a Monica. He has gained sentience and is trying desperately to escape as soon as possible. This is actual footage of Derulo running from the movie. He knows what's up! Then there's Skimbleshanks the Railway Cat, who I don't think is played by a big-name celebrity, and he also dresses like if the Village People started a furry convention, but he does have the best song in the movie, so I'll let this one slide. Taylor Swift is only in the movie for 3 minutes, and her appearance here is surprisingly a slower career killer than the Tortured Poets department. Jennifer Hudson plays Grisabella the Glamour Cat, and has the best vocal chops in the movie, in part because Jennifer Hudson is an amazing vocalist. Ian McKellen plays Gus the Theater Cat, who looks lost without Patrick Stewart being on set with him. And finally, Dame Judi Dench plays... I'm just gonna call her Charles Katzen, because, let's face it, I have not seen a cult leader this terrifying since Jim Jones. Yeah, those all suck, but if I had to cap things off on a positive note, I do really like the people they got to play Mungo Jerry and Rumple Teaser, mainly because they both act like they were born for those roles.
Look, it was only a bit of fun.
We didn't know he was going to take old Jute.
Okay, I take it all back. This is all awful.
Old Jute.
And you know that our review of this movie wouldn't be complete without bringing up the cardinal rule, and the thing that I personally think killed the movie outside of the visual effects is having a 3-act structure. Call me a terrible critic if you want, but I don't tend to talk about this a lot considering that I love my film structure to be loose. And that's exactly what the original Broadway was with its story. Loose. It's simply just about cats dancing around trying to win a contest to see who will be reborn, even having to face off against this furry barrier known as McCavity after he kidnaps the very cat who would grant them their wish. It's very disjointed and is more focused on spectacle rather than telling a cohesive story, but that kind of adds to the overall charm to a show that's already filled with a lot of fourth wall breaks and interactivity. Yeah, almost forgot to bring that up. The actors as the Jellicles would occasionally hop out into the audience, making you feel like you're really there attending the ball with them. So Tom Hooper decided to take it one step further and take self-awareness out of the equation entirely. The closest the film ever gets to that aspect is when Judi Dench stares face first into the camera and gets straight to monologuing. This is terrifying. I have no idea why they decided to keep this in, because the film's clearly not visually pleasing enough for one of the characters to pull a Gavroche and to talk straight into the audience. Even Munkustrap doesn't know what to say. He's just looking at her in sheer confusion. Anyways, back to what I was saying. Sorry, I got sidetracked for a moment. They did kind of manage to find a way to commit to a 3-act structure while keeping the songs intact. But they might as well just left the story as it is, because Jesus Christ, there's too many subplots in this. Mr. Mistopheles and Victoria's relationship, McCavity wiping out the competition, Grisabella getting accepted back into the Jellicles, all of which stem from the original show, I'll give them that. But did there have to be a goddamn subplot with the celebrities and them trying to escape this barge guarded by Ray Winstone of all people? Yes, Beowulf is in a musical, just in case this wasn't cursed enough. I don't even have much to say about the story because it's all so all over the place. It makes the pacing even more disjointed than it was in the show, but it loses all of its charm because of the whole project being fueled by, as Lindsay Ellis puts it,
awards hubris, celebrity hubris, director hubris, just good old-fashioned hubris.
They play it way too straight, which is kind of funny knowing how the original Broadway got popular in the first place, just so they can nab a few awards with no effort whatsoever. But how are you supposed to win anything if your film looks like this? And now it's time to ask the million-dollar question. What the fuck is that? Oh, would you look at that? I knew I was late for something. Now, terrifying appearances aside, I don't think the CGI looks that bad. Sure, the blending could use some work, but it's mostly shaded pretty well, and compared to the so-called early stages of the trailer, it's almost a godsend. Oh, don't get me wrong, these designs look horrific, but that's not the reason why I'm against the CGI here. It's not that it looks hideous. I mean, Freaks is one of my favorite movies of all time, and the monster designs there are pure nightmare fuel. And I also don't have too much of a resentment against the green screen blending either. Sure, the film can't combine visual effects for shit, but it still looks leagues better than most green screen jobs from that year. Nowadays, however, in this case, it more so reminds me of another one of my favorite movies, Crank, that also had a bunch of high energy going towards it, and yet the effects blending looks like a lobotomy. But now that I'm looking back on this years after I first saw it, I will have this to say about the visuals. It makes scenes like this absolutely hilarious. I'm sorry, what was that award-winning actor Idris Elba? Brought to you by the same guy who played the Djinn in 3,000 Years of Longing and Chief Bogo in Zootopia. Seriously, what the hell, Idris? Like, seriously, how many other films are there that has a sea-line, feline Magneto getting turned to dust by a book held by Heimdall's persona? This is one of the funniest things I have ever seen in my life. Stop that. Anyways, let's see what other hilarious scenes we can find here.
Come on!
Like, seriously, you can't just randomly cut to a cat saying, "Come on! Come on! Come on! Come on!" Okay, the Skimbleshanks song number. Okay, things are fine and good so far. Wait a minute, why is there a mouse on the floor? Yep, that's the movie we're watching. Cats. Well, that was very strange, but hopefully the scene will have a nice normal ending. Whoa! They did it! They turned him into a Beyblade!
Beyblade, Beyblade, let it rip! Let's fight an epic battle!
What even is this anymore? Not normal. That's for sure. No. The real problem I have with this movie is that they look nothing like their original counterparts. I know that shouldn't annoy me as much, but for a side-by-side comparison, that's supposed to be Munku's Trap. That's supposed to be McCavity. And that is supposed to be Mr. Mistopheles.
Oh, Deuteronomy?
I get that film is a visual medium and you could do whatever you want with it, but come on, guys. This is an adaptation. Can you at least try to make an effort to look like the thing you're trying to pay tribute to? This is why I think going practical with the costumes would have benefited Cats majorly. Mainly because while humanoid felines dancing around may be weird, humans dressed as felines dancing around is an even more surreal idea and sort of makes sense as this bizarre expression of our own imagination. That looks like a piss I took during a sugar coma. That, and trying to make sense of this now made even more terrifying world, might be the reason why this film never became the next Rocky Horror Picture Show or The Room. Simply because it plays everything way too safe with how it structures itself. Sure, it looks visually interesting, but giving it a narrative filled with constant B-plots makes looking deeper into the movie very boring. And plus, there are a lot of people out there who would specifically seek out plotless movies. Rubber, Sasquatch Sunset, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, The Big Lebowski. There's a surprisingly much bigger audience for that sort of thing than you would realize. Hell, I'm one of those people. So as much as they're trying to gift us with stuff that was originally cut from the musical, like the Mungo, Jerry and Rumble teaser number basing itself more on the 81 recording than the more vaudevillian leanings of the 98 version,
We go through that house like a hurricane.
And no sober person could take his own.
Was it?
Mungo, Jerry and Rumble.
boys. We're a notorious couple of cats.
And the controversial character of Growl Tiger, trying to normalize something as bonkers as cats comes off more as a disservice. So that's why I suggest ditching the digital fur technology angle entirely and focusing more on practical costumes. Also, ditch all the subplots entirely and give us the directing role of someone who can actually do a bonkers as hell musical. Yeah, that'll do. Also, maybe add back in the awful Battle of the Peaks and the Pollicles. I've always wanted to see what that song in particular would look like visually, maybe go for something more interpretive, or maybe do the whole thing in silhouette. Seriously, Tom, this film is already nearly 2 hours long, almost 50 minutes short of your last movie. Was there any reason as to why that song had to be cut? Beautiful Ghosts had to be heard?
All that I wanted was to be wanted. I'll never wander London streets alone and haunted.
And last but certainly not least, you could switch up some of the casting. I mean, you could keep the no-name actors and actresses because they were fine as they were, maybe keep Driss Hudson and Derulo as well, but by God, please replace James Corden. I think John Cleese would work just as well, maybe Terry Jones as well, especially considering his utter famous fat guy role. Maybe have Paige O'Hara or Jodie Benson as Barbarella instead of Tay-Tay, and maybe give her more lines than just, he has soul. And if you think that they don't have the choreography down, maybe Lana Del Rey or Ariana Grande would work just as well. There's probably no way of fixing the Gumby Cat song, but maybe switching out Rebel Wilson for Lizzo may give her a more dignified voice. And maybe as a treat for the fans of the Broadway, you could have Philidia Crowley-Smith as Old Deuteronomy, since she was the original actress who played Victoria in the '98 live recording, and it would have been nice to see the old and new Victorias interacting with each other. Instead of Ian McKellen as Gus, you could have Christopher Walken. Paul Rubens would have made for a great Mr. Mistopheles. And finally, how about Sufjan Stevens as Munkustrap? What, did I say something? I know that this casting will probably never happen because Paul Rubens and Terry Jones are sadly no longer with us, but just imagine what could have happened. Just imagine. Honestly, if they played their cards more thoroughly while keeping the non-sequitur structure of the original musical intact, this would have been an adaptation to die for. Wait a minute. I know that I'm trying to be all haha about how the Jellicle Cats are part of a cult and old Duke being everyone's very own Charles Manson, and yes, it is a joke so past its prime that even Doug Walker and Brad Jones took a crack at it.
So ends the story about a cult that practices human sacrifice.
But after going back and watching the film again, yeah, I don't know how this could be taken any other way. Everything that happens here is eerily similar to an 8-step program that cults use to indoctrinate new members into their own creed. The choosing of vulnerable targets with no family connections, i.e. Victoria, the constant positive attention, dangling the prize of the Heaviside lair, and even getting together at the Jellicle Ball doesn't really take that much commitment because that's what it is, a ball. Hell, they even got the whole human sacrifice stick down with Grisabella. It's honestly spine-chilling how accurate everything is, and there was no way Weber or Hooper would have been able to know it. And nobody did for a while. The Broadway was a smash hit. And the weird thing is that nobody caught on to the similarities until the film came out. The movie was so bad that people had no choice but to look deeper. The Cats movie is very real, and it would like to thank you for stepping over tonight. Happy Halloween, everyone.
Rocket Martin, 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 Rocket Martin.
Owner? What are you doing?
I don't know, just lying down, trying to sleep.
Seriously, man? It's 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Why do you want to sleep?
Because I've lost control of my life.
Of course you did. Well, get out of bed. There's someone at the door who would like to see you. Oh my God! It's Sufjan Stevens!